The wager. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel ballroom, where Chicago's business elite mingled over champagne and carefully crafted small talk. Vivian Cross adjusted her emerald silk dress and scanned the crowd, her confidence wavering for the first time that evening. "You're having second thoughts," Marcus Reed observed, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. His knowing smirk was infuriating and comforting in equal measure. "I never have second thoughts," Vivian replied, accepting the champagne with more gratitude than she'd admit. "I'm simply strategizing." Jade Winters materialized on her other side, her red hair catching the light like fire. "The bet still stands, darling. Kiss the most attractive stranger here, get his number, and we'll cover your portion of the Hamptons house rental this summer." $2,000, Marcus added helpfully, "though I'm beginning to think you're all talk, Cross." Vivian's competitive nature flared. She'd built her career in marketing on calculated risks and bold moves. This should be simple. "Please, I could charm a monk out of his vows." "Then prove it," Jade challenged, scanning the room. "Because I see at least 3 gorgeous men who looked like they stepped out of a magazine." But Vivian had already spotted him. He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, seemingly oblivious to the admiring glances from several women nearby. Tall and lean, with dark hair that looked deliberately tousled, he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly salary. There was something magnetic about the way he held himself, confident but not arrogant, powerful but approachable. "Him," she said, nodding toward the window. Marcus whistled low. "Ambitious choice. He looks like he could buy and sell this entire hotel." "Which makes him perfect," Vivian replied, smoothing her dress. "Rich, gorgeous, and completely out of my usual league. When I walk away with his number, there'll be no question about who won this bet." She handed Marcus her champagne and began making her way across the room, her heels clicking against the marble with purpose. As she drew closer, she could see he was even more striking than she'd initially thought. His profile was sharp and aristocratic, but there was something almost brooding about the way he stared out at the city lights. "Beautiful view," she said, stepping up beside him. He turned, and Vivian felt her breath catch. His eyes were the color of a storm darkened, framed by thick lashes that would make any woman jealous. A small scar cut through his left eyebrow, adding an intriguing edge to his otherwise perfect features. "It is," he agreed, his voice carrying a slight British accent that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Though I have to admit, the view just improved considerably." The line was smooth, practiced, but something in his eyes suggested he meant it. Vivian felt a flutter of genuine attraction that had nothing to do with the bet. "I'm Vivian," she said, extending her hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Vivian." His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and he held on just a moment longer than necessary. "I don't believe I caught your last name." "I didn't throw it," she replied with a smile that had charmed clients and competitors alike. "What brings you to Chicago's most exclusive networking event? Business or pleasure?" "Bit of both, actually." His eyes never left her face, as if he was trying to memorize every detail. "And what about you?" "Let me guess. Marketing executive, probably. Works for one of the big firms downtown. Definitely knows exactly how beautiful she is, but pretends not to notice." Vivian laughed, surprised by his accuracy. 2 out of 3 isn't bad, though I'd argue the third point. "Would you?" He stepped closer, close enough that she could catch his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her want to lean in. "I think you know exactly the effect you have on people, Miss Vivian." The way he said her name, with that slight accent and dark undertone, made heat pool in her stomach. This was supposed to be about the bet, about proving a point to her friends. But suddenly, standing here with this mysterious stranger, Vivian found herself genuinely intrigued. "You're very presumptuous," she said, tilting her head. "What makes you think you have me all figured out? Call it a talent for reading people." His smile was enigmatic, though I have to admit, you're more intriguing than most. The chemistry between them was undeniable, crackling like electricity in the space that separated them. Vivian made a decision that felt both calculated and completely spontaneous. "Would you like to know what I think?" she asked, stepping even closer. "Desperately. I think you're used to getting what you want. I think you're dangerous in the best possible way, and I think—" She rose on her tiptoes, her lips nearly brushing his ear. "You want to kiss me as much as I want to kiss you." When she pulled back, his eyes had darkened to nearly black. "You're right on all counts." "Then what are you waiting for?" He didn't need to be asked twice. His hands cupped her face as he captured her lips in a kiss that was anything but gentle. It was hungry, desperate, full of a passion that seemed to surprise them both. Vivian's hands fisted in his suit jacket as she kissed him back with equal fervor, forgetting about the bet, the crowd, everything except the taste of whiskey on his lips, and the way he kissed her like she was the only thing that mattered. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vivian felt dizzy with want. "I should go," he said quietly, but his hands were still on her face. "Should you?" she whispered. He pressed his forehead against hers. This was unexpected. Before Vivian could respond, before she could ask his name or get his number or do any of the things the bet required, he stepped back. "Thank you for the dance, beautiful Vivian." And then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd like he'd never been there at all. Vivian stood by the window, touching her lips, wondering if she'd imagined the whole thing. It wasn't until Marcus appeared beside her that she remembered the bet at all. "So?" he asked expectantly. "Number?" Vivian stared at the spot where her mystery man had vanished. I forgot to ask." The revelation. Monday morning arrived with the kind of corporate chaos that made Vivian's coffee seem woefully inadequate. The Meridian marketing offices buzzed with nervous energy as employees whispered about the mysterious acquisition that had been finalized over the weekend. After 15 years of independence, their boutique firm was now part of a larger empire, though no one seemed to know exactly what that meant for their jobs. "Did you hear anything from Rebecca in HR?" Marcus asked, sliding into the chair across from Vivian's desk. His usually immaculate appearance showed signs of stress. His tie was slightly crooked, and there were dark circles under his eyes. "Nothing concrete," Vivian replied, trying to focus on her computer screen instead of the memory of storm-colored eyes that had haunted her dreams. "Just that we're supposed to gather in the main conference room at 10 for some kind of announcement." Jade appeared in the doorway, her red hair pulled back in an unusually severe bun. "Please tell me you've heard something more substantial than the rumors flying around the break room. Jenny from accounting swears she saw moving trucks outside the executive floor at 6 this morning." The three friends had been inseparable since their first day at Meridian, bonding over late-night client presentations and their shared ambition to climb the corporate ladder. Now, facing uncertainty, they naturally gravitated toward each other. "Whatever happens," Vivian said, standing to straighten her navy blazer, "we stick together. This company needs us more than we need it." The confidence in her voice was mostly for show. Meridian had been her home for 5 years, the place where she'd proven herself as one of the most successful account executives in Chicago. The thought of starting over somewhere else made her stomach clench. At exactly 10 o'clock, the trio joined their colleagues, filing into the glass-walled conference room that overlooked the city skyline. Rebecca Stone, their HR director, stood at the front, looking unusually formal in a black suit that seemed chosen for a funeral rather than a corporate meeting. Thank you all for gathering on such short notice, Rebecca began, her voice carrying across the room. As you know, Meridian Marketing has been acquired by Blackwood Industries, a diversified investment firm with headquarters in London and New York. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Blackwood Industries was a name that carried weight. Old. Money, strategic acquisitions, and a reputation for either elevating companies to new heights or dismantling them completely. I'd like to introduce you to your new CEO, Rebecca continued, gesturing toward the door. Vivian's heart stopped. The man who walked into the conference room was devastatingly familiar. The same dark hair, the same aristocratic features, the same confident stride that had caught her attention at the mixer. But gone was the relaxed stranger who had kissed her like the world was ending. This version wore authority like armor, his expression coolly professional as his gaze swept the room. Their eyes met across the crowded space, and Vivian saw a flash of recognition that he quickly suppressed. Her face heated with embarrassment and something else, a traitorous flutter of attraction that she desperately tried to ignore. "Nathan Blackwood," he said, his British accent more pronounced in the formal setting. "I'm looking forward to working with each of you as we transition Meridian into its next phase of growth." His voice was exactly as she remembered, but now it carried the weight of corporate power. Vivian felt exposed, as if everyone in the room could see the memory of their kiss written across her face. "Mr. Blackwood has extensive experience in strategic restructuring," Rebecca continued, apparently oblivious to the tension crackling between her new boss and one of her employees. "He'll be conducting individual meetings with department heads over the next few weeks to assess our current operations." Nathan's gaze found Vivian again, lingering just long enough to make her pulse race. "I believe in getting to know my team personally," he said, and something in his tone suggested those words were meant specifically for her. "I'll be scheduling time with each of you to discuss your roles and contributions to the company." The meeting continued with discussions of benefits, organizational changes, and timeline expectations, but Vivian heard none of it. Her mind was reeling with implications. The man she'd kissed on a bet, the stranger who had made her forget her own name with a single touch, was now her boss. Not just her boss, the CEO of the entire company. When the meeting finally ended, Vivian tried to escape quickly, but Nathan's voice stopped her. "Ms. Cross, isn't it?" His tone was perfectly professional, but she caught the slight emphasis on her surname, the one he hadn't learned Friday night. "I'd like to schedule some time to discuss your portfolio this afternoon, perhaps." Around them, employees were filing out, chatting about the changes and speculating about their new leadership. Marcus and Jade had paused near the door, clearly waiting for her, but Vivian found herself frozen under Nathan's steady gaze. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood," she managed, proud that her voice remained steady. "What time works best for you?" 3 o'clock, my office." He handed her a business card, his fingers brushing hers briefly. The contact sent electricity up her arm. "I'm looking forward to our conversation." The pause before conversation was subtle but unmistakable. As Nathan left the conference room, nodding politely to other employees, Vivian stared down at his business card. The expensive cardstock felt heavy in her hands, like a promise or a threat. "Earth to Vivian," Jade's voice cut through her thoughts. "You look like you've seen a ghost. If only it were that simple." "I'm fine," Vivian lied, slipping the business card into her blazer pocket. "Just processing everything." Marcus frowned, studying her face with the perception that came from years of friendship. "You sure? You seemed a little, I don't know, strange during that meeting." "New boss, new anxiety," Vivian replied with a forced smile. "You know how I get about change." But as they walked back to their desks, Vivian's mind was already racing ahead to 3 o'clock. She had 5 hours to figure out how to face the man who had kissed her senseless, who now held her career in his hands, and who looked at her like he remembered every second of their encounter as vividly as she did. Friday night had been about a bet, about proving something to her friends and herself, but this was about survival in a game where she was no longer sure of the rules. Professional boundaries. The executive floor had been transformed over the weekend. Gone were the warm, eclectic touches that had made Meridian feel like home. In their place was sleek, modern furniture and abstract art that screamed expensive minimalism. Nathan's corner office dominated the space, its glass walls offering a commanding view of both the city and his employees. Vivian stood outside his door at exactly 3 o'clock, her portfolio clutched against her chest like armor. Through the transparent walls, she could see Nathan on a phone call, his back to the door as he gazed out at the Chicago skyline. Even from behind, he commanded attention. The way he held himself, the expensive cut of his suit, the casual confidence that spoke of a man accustomed to power. Oliver Hayes, Nathan's assistant, looked up from his desk with the kind of polite efficiency that expensive private schools bred into their graduates. "Ms. Cross, Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. Please go right in." Nathan ended his call as she entered, turning to face her with an expression that was perfectly professional and completely unreadable. "Vivian, thank you for making time." The use of her first name sent an unwelcome flutter through her stomach. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. I brought my portfolio as requested. Please sit." He gestured to one of the leather chairs facing his desk, waiting until she was seated before taking his own chair. The power dynamic was clear. She was in his territory now, playing by his rules. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Across the expanse of his mahogany desk, the silence stretched, charged with the memory of Friday night and the impossibility of their current situation. "Impressive work," Nathan said finally, flipping through her portfolio. His fingers moved carefully over the presentations and campaign materials, but Vivian noticed he wasn't really reading them. "The Hartwell Industries campaign particularly caught my attention. Innovative approach to a traditional market." "Thank you." Her voice sounded steadier than she felt. "We managed to increase their market share by 30% in 6 months. Remarkable." His eyes lifted to meet hers. "Tell me, do you always get so personally invested in your work?" The question hung in the air between them, loaded with double meaning. Vivian felt heat creep up her neck, but forced herself to maintain eye contact. "I believe in giving my clients everything I have," she replied carefully. "Complete dedication tends to yield the best results." Nathan's smile was sharp as a blade. "I imagine it does." The next 20 minutes followed a similar pattern. Professional. Questions laced with undertones that made Vivian's pulse race. Nathan was testing her, she realized, seeing how she would handle the tension between them. But two could play that game. "Will there be any changes to my client roster?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. "I want to ensure I'm meeting your expectations." "My expectations are quite high," Nathan replied, his gaze dropping briefly to where her blouse had opened slightly at the neckline before snapping back to her face. "But I have a feeling you're more than capable of rising to meet them." A knock on the glass door interrupted them. Camille Torres, the ambitious brunette from the creative department, stood in the doorway looking perfectly composed, in a red dress that hugged every curve. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you asked me to bring the Morrison files by 3:30. "Of course, come in, Camille." Nathan's tone remained professional, but Vivian caught the way his assistant straightened, the way Oliver's eyes tracked Camille's movement across the room. Vivian watched as Camille placed the files on Nathan's desk with practiced grace, her fingers brushing his briefly as she handed them over. I took the liberty of adding some additional market analysis that I thought might be relevant. Thorough as always, Nathan replied, though his attention seemed divided between Camille and the woman sitting across from his desk. The interaction lasted only seconds, but it was long enough for Vivian to understand the dynamics at play. She wasn't the only one who had noticed their new CEO's appeal, and she definitely wasn't the only one positioning herself for his attention. After Camille left, Nathan returned his focus to Vivian with renewed intensity. "Where were we?" "You were explaining your expectations." "Ah, yes." He closed her portfolio and pushed it across the desk toward her. "I expect excellence, Miss Cross. Nothing less than your absolute best effort." Their fingers touched as she reached for the portfolio, and neither of them pulled away immediately. The contact sent electricity shooting up Vivian's arm, and she saw Nathan's pupils dilate slightly in response. "You'll have it," she said quietly. "I'm counting on it." The words carried weight beyond their professional meaning, and Vivian found herself drowning in the intensity of his gaze. This was dangerous territory, flirting with disaster in the most literal sense, but she couldn't seem to make herself care. Over the following weeks, their encounters became a carefully choreographed dance of professional interaction and barely suppressed attraction. Nathan implemented new policies with ruthless efficiency, streamlining operations and cutting redundancies. Several employees were let go, and others were reorganized into new departments. Vivian's team survived the restructuring, but not without casualties. The atmosphere in the office grew tense, with everyone walking on eggshells around their demanding new CEO. Everyone except Vivian, who found herself inexplicably protected from the worst of his corporate machinations. "He's different with you," Marcus observed one evening as they worked late on a presentation. The office was mostly empty. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. "Have you noticed? Blackwood, I mean, he's softer." Vivian kept her eyes on her computer screen. "I don't know what you mean." "Come on, Viv. I've seen the way he looks at you during meetings, and that presentation you gave last week. Any other employee would have been torn apart for those numbers." But he barely said a word. Before Vivian could respond, the elevator chimed at the far end of the office. Nathan emerged, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd been working as late as they had. "Ms. Cross, Mr. Reed." He nodded to them as he approached, burning the midnight oil. "Just putting the finishing touches on the Peterson proposal," Marcus replied, but his eyes were curious as they moved between Nathan and Vivian. "I'll leave you to it then." Nathan's gaze lingered on Vivian. "Don't work too late. Tomorrow's another busy day." As he disappeared into his office, Marcus raised an eyebrow. "See what I mean?" But Vivian was already gathering her things, her heart pounding with a dangerous idea. "I should check if he needs anything before I go. You know, professional courtesy." Marcus looked skeptical, but didn't argue as she made her way across the empty office toward Nathan's door. The glass walls made privacy impossible during business hours, but now, with the office dark and deserted, they felt more like a fishbowl than protection. Nathan looked up as she knocked, and something shifted in his expression when he saw her standing there alone. "Come in," he said, his voice lower than it had been earlier. Vivian stepped inside, closing the door behind her. The click of the latch seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet space. "I wanted to make sure you didn't need anything before I left for the night." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her with those storm-colored eyes that haunted her dreams. "What I need, Miss Cross, is probably not something you're prepared to offer." The words hung between them like a challenge, and Vivian felt her resolve crumble. This was insane. He was her boss. This could destroy everything she'd worked for. But when he stood and moved around his desk toward her, she didn't step away. "This is a terrible idea," she whispered. "Absolutely," he agreed, stopping just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "It could ruin everything." Most likely. So why can't I make myself leave? Nathan's hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb tracing across her lower lip. Because some things are worth the risk. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable, desperate and hungry, and full of weeks of suppressed longing. Vivian's hands fisted in his shirt as he pressed her back against the door, his mouth claiming hers with a passion that made their first kiss seem restrained by comparison. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back over them like cold water. "This can't happen again," Vivian said, even as her body betrayed her by leaning into his touch. "No," Nathan agreed, but his forehead was pressed against hers, his hands still framing her face. "It absolutely can't." But even as they said the words, both of them knew they were lying. The stakes rise. The revelation came on a Thursday morning that started like any other. Vivian was reviewing quarterly reports when her sister Diana called, her voice tight with controlled panic. "Viv, I need you to meet me for lunch. It's about Dad's old business partner." Something in Diana's tone made Vivian's stomach clench. Their father had died when Vivian was 22, leaving behind memories of a man who worked too hard and loved too fiercely. His construction company had dissolved shortly after his death, the partnership agreements tangled in legal complications that their mother had never fully explained. They met at a quiet bistro in Lincoln Park, away from the downtown business district where curious colleagues might overhear. Diana looked exhausted, her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. "I've been going through Mom's papers since she moved to Florida," Diana began, without preamble, sliding a manila folder across the table. "Found some things she kept from Dad's business, things about the partnership dissolution." Vivian opened the folder, scanning legal documents that made little sense, until she saw a familiar name in bold letters: Blackwood Construction, L'Extatide. Her blood turned to ice. "Diana, what exactly are you trying to tell me?" Dad's partner was James Blackwood, and according to these documents, the partnership didn't end because of Dad's death. It ended because James Blackwood systematically destroyed Dad's reputation, stole his clients, and left him with nothing but debt. The words hit Vivian like physical blows. She stared at the papers, seeing her father's signature alongside another man's, a signature she now recognized from corporate documents that had been crossing her desk for weeks. "James Blackwood," she whispered. "Nathan's father." Diana's eyes widened. "You know Nathan Blackwood?" "He's my boss." The words tasted like ash in her mouth. "Diana, he bought our company. He's been playing me this entire time." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The acquisition hadn't been random. Nathan hadn't stumbled upon Meridian Marketing by chance. He had targeted her specifically, just as his father had targeted theirs 25 years ago. That evening, Vivian stood outside Nathan's apartment building in the Gold Coast, her hands shaking with rage and betrayal. The doorman recognized her from previous visits that now seemed tainted by deception, and waved her through without question. Nathan answered his door in jeans and a white button-down, looking relaxed and devastatingly handsome. His smile faded when he saw her expression. "Vivian, what's wrong?" She pushed past him into the apartment, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floors. The space was exactly what she'd expected. Expensive, minimalist, coldly perfect, like everything else about him, apparently. "James Blackwood," she said without turning around. "Your father." The silence behind her was deafening. When she finally faced him, Nathan's expression had gone carefully blank, the mask of corporate control sliding into place. "I see you've been doing your research." "Research?" Her voice cracked with bitter laughter. "I didn't have to research anything, Nathan. It was all right there in my father's papers, the partnership agreement, the client list, the systematic destruction of everything he'd built. Nathan moved to his bar cart, pouring himself 2 fingers of scotch with steady hands. "Would you like a drink?" "I'd like the truth." He drained half the glass before answering. "My father was a businessman, Vivian. He saw an opportunity and he took it." "An opportunity." The words exploded out of her. "He destroyed my father, left him with nothing but debt and shame. Dad worked himself to death trying to rebuild what your father stole from him. And you think I'm here to finish the job?" Nathan's voice was dangerously quiet. "That I bought your little marketing firm as some sort of, what, revenge fantasy? Aren't you?" He set down his glass with deliberate care. "Yes." The simple admission hit her harder than a physical blow. All the air seemed to leave her lungs at once. "Everything," she whispered. "The mixer, the kiss, the job meetings, it was all planned." "No." The word came out sharp, almost violent. "Friday night had nothing to do with business. I had no idea who you were when I kissed you." "But you figured it out." "I figured it out," he confirmed, "and I should have walked away. But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Nathan moved closer, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her take an involuntary step back. "Because somewhere between planning your professional destruction and actually meeting you, I made the mistake of falling in love." The words hung between them like a live wire. Vivian stared at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. "You're lying." "I wish I were." His laugh was bitter. "Do you have any idea how inconvenient it is to fall in love with someone you're supposed to destroy? How it feels to lie awake at night wanting someone you have no right to touch?" "Then why?" Her voice broke. "If you love me, why are you doing this?" "Because 25 years ago your father nearly destroyed mine." Nathan's composure finally cracked, raw emotion bleeding through. "James Blackwood didn't steal anything, Vivian. Your father was cooking the books, skimming money from client accounts. My father discovered it and tried to handle it quietly, give him a chance to make it right." "That's not true. Your father's solution was to disappear with what was left in the company accounts and leave my father holding the bag for millions in missing funds." Nathan's voice was relentless now. "It took him 15 years to rebuild his reputation, to dig out from under the debt your father left behind." Vivian felt the room spinning. "No, that's not. Dad wouldn't." "I have the financial records, Vivian. Bank statements, audit reports, everything. Your father was a thief, and my father was too much of a gentleman to destroy your family's memory of him by going public with the truth." The manila folder fell from her nerveless fingers, papers scattering across Nathan's pristine floor. Everything she thought she knew about her family, about her father, was crumbling around her. "So what now?" she asked, her voice barely above. A whisper. "You've got your revenge. You've destroyed me just like you planned." Nathan crossed to her then, his hands framing her face with desperate gentleness. "I never wanted to destroy you. I wanted to destroy the daughter of Thomas Cross, the abstract concept I'd been hating for years. But you're not abstract, Vivian. You're real and brilliant and stubborn and impossible, and you make me want things I have no right to want." "Like what?" "Like forever." His thumb traced across her cheekbone, catching a tear she didn't realize had fallen. "Like waking up next to you every morning, and falling asleep with you in my arms every night. Like building something beautiful together, instead of tearing each other apart." Despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the impossible situation they'd created, Vivian felt herself leaning into his touch. "We can't," she whispered. "After everything that's happened between our families. Our father's mistakes don't have to be ours." "Nathan," He kissed her then, soft and desperate and full of promises neither of them was sure they could keep. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Please, just tonight. Let me show you that this, whatever this is between us, it's real." Vivian knew she should leave, should walk away and never look back. But when Nathan took her hand and led her toward his bedroom, she followed without resistance, because some mistakes she was learning were worth making twice. Love conquers all. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a grey October morning that matched Vivian's mood perfectly. She sat in her car outside the Blackwood Industries building, staring up at the gleaming tower that had become both her professional home and emotional battlefield over the past 2 months. Her resignation letter lay on the passenger seat, signed and sealed, ready to end everything. Inside her purse, her phone buzzed with another message from Nathan. She didn't need to read it to know what it said. The same desperate pleas he'd been sending since their confrontation 3 days ago. The same promises that their love could survive the weight of their family's history. But love, Vivian had learned, wasn't always enough. Elena Rodriguez, her assistant, had been fielding calls and managing her calendar with the discretion of a seasoned diplomat. The entire office seemed to sense the tension between their CEO and their star account executive, though no one dared mention it openly. "Ms. Cross?" Elena's voice was gentle as she appeared beside the car window. "The board meeting is about to start. Mr. Blackwood asked me to find you." Vivian rolled down the window, letting the October wind cut through the car's warmth. "Tell him I'll be right there." The elevator ride to the top floor felt eternal. Thomas Ashford, the silver-haired chairman of Blackwood's board, stood waiting, with 2 other board members, men in expensive suits, whose expressions ranged from curious to concerned. "Vivian," Thomas greeted her with paternal warmth that made her stomach clench with guilt. "I understand congratulations are in order. Nathan tells us you've been instrumental in the Meridian acquisition's success." If only he knew the whole truth. The boardroom was a testament to corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan, a mahogany table that could seat 20, and original artwork that cost more than most people's houses. Nathan stood at the far end, impeccable in a charcoal suit, but Vivian could see the tension in his shoulders, the carefully controlled desperation in his eyes. "Gentlemen," he began as they took their seats, "I've called this meeting to discuss the future of our Chicago operations." For the next hour, Nathan presented quarterly reports with his usual precision. Revenue was up 30%. Client retention had exceeded projections. The Meridian acquisition was being hailed as a masterpiece of strategic planning. But Vivian barely heard the numbers. She was watching Nathan's hands as he gestured, remembering how those same hands had traced patterns on her skin just days ago. She was studying his profile, memorizing the line of his jaw and the way he moved with predatory grace around the boardroom. "Which brings us to personnel decisions," Nathan continued, and Vivian's attention snapped back to the present. "I'm recommending several key promotions within the marketing division." He outlined his plans with methodical care. Marcus elevated to senior account executive, Jade given her own client roster, several junior staff members moved into positions of greater responsibility. Every change was logical, defensible, designed to maximize efficiency and profitability. "And what about your star performer?" Thomas asked, smiling at Vivian. "Surely Ms. Cross deserves recognition for her contributions." Nathan's eyes met hers across the table, and she saw him make his decision in real time. "Actually," he said quietly, "I'm afraid Ms. Cross has submitted her resignation." The room erupted in surprised murmurs. Thomas's eyebrows shot toward his hairline, while the other board members exchanged confused glances. "Resignation?" Thomas turned to Vivian. "My dear, Surely there's been some misunderstanding. Nathan assured us you were committed to the company's future. Vivian felt every eye in the room on her, but she could only look at Nathan. He was giving her an out, she realized, a clean escape from the impossible situation they'd created. She began, then stopped. The resignation letter in her purse felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Actually, there's something you all should know. Nathan went very still. Vivian, don't. Thomas Cross was my father, she said, her voice steady despite the earthquake in her chest. The Thomas Cross, who was James Blackwood's partner 25 years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. Thomas's face had gone pale, while the other board members looked between Nathan and Vivian with dawning comprehension. I see, Thomas said slowly. And Nathan, you were aware of this connection? Yes. When did you become aware? Nathan's jaw tightened. Shortly after the acquisition. And yet you continued to work with Ms. Cross? To promote her within the company? Yes. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying them both with shrewd eyes that had navigated corporate politics for 4 decades. Forgive my bluntness, but is there a personal relationship between you two? The question hung in the air like smoke. Vivian felt her cheeks burn, but she met Thomas's gaze steadily. Yes, Nathan said before she could respond. There is? More silence. Then Thomas sighed deeply, the sound of a man who had seen too much corporate drama over the years. Nathan, you realize this puts the board in an impossible position. The optics alone could be devastating if this became public knowledge. I understand. Do you? Because I'm not sure you comprehend the full ramifications here. Thomas's voice hardened. We're talking about potential lawsuits, SEC investigations, congressional hearings about corporate nepotism and conflicts of interest. Vivian watched Nathan's face, seeing the moment when the full weight of consequence settled on his shoulders. Everything he'd built, everything he'd worked for, could be destroyed by their relationship. Then I'll make this simple, Nathan said, straightening to his full height. I'm resigning as CEO, effective immediately. Nathan, no, Vivian gasped, but he continued without pause. Thomas, you have my recommendation to promote David Martinez from the London office. He's more than capable of managing the transition. You can't be serious, Thomas protested. You're willing to throw away everything you've built for this? Nathan looked directly at Vivian then, and his smile was soft and real and completely without regret. Yes, he said simply, I am. The board erupted in arguments and protests, but Vivian heard none of it. She was staring at Nathan, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time, not the ruthless CEO or the son seeking revenge, but simply a man, willing to sacrifice everything for love. Stop, she said quietly, then louder when the room didn't respond. Stop! The arguing ceased. Every face turned toward her. Nathan, you're not resigning, she said firmly. And I'm not either. Vivian, no, listen to me. She stood, addressing the room with the same confidence she'd used to win over difficult clients. You're right that this situation is complicated, but you're wrong about the solution. She pulled out her phone, scrolling to the photos Diana had sent her the night before. These are the financial records from my father's construction company. The real records, not the sanitized version that was released after his death. She looked at Thomas directly. My father was embezzling funds. James Blackwood tried to handle it quietly, and when that failed, he did what he had to do to protect his investors and employees. Thomas's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. More importantly, Vivian continued, Nathan had no knowledge of our family connection when he acquired Meridian. The decision was based purely on business merits, which I can prove. With documentation, she moved around the table to stand beside Nathan, her hand finding his. What we have here isn't a scandal waiting to happen. It's an opportunity to show that good business practices and personal integrity can coexist, that love can inspire better decisions, not worse ones. Thomas studied them for a long moment, then surprised everyone by laughing. You know what? In 40 years of corporate governance, I've never seen anything quite like this. He stood, extending his hand to Nathan. Congratulations, son. You've found yourself a woman who fights as hard as you do. 6 months later, Vivian stood in Nathan's office, their office now since her promotion to Vice President of Strategic Development, watching him on a conference call with their London team. The late afternoon sun caught the silver in his hair, that she'd discovered was premature, a result of too much stress and too little sleep in his younger years. The scandal they'd feared never materialized. Instead, their story had become something of a corporate legend. The CEO who chose love over revenge, the executive who chose truth over convenience. Marcus and Jade had taken over the Meridian division with impressive skill, while Elena had proven invaluable as Vivian's right hand in her new role. Even Camille had found her place, heading up the creative department with flair and dedication. "Dinner?" Nathan asked as he ended the call, loosening his tie with the same elegant efficiency that had first caught her attention. "Absolutely," Vivian replied, but instead of heading for the door, she moved around his desk and settled onto his lap. "Vivian," he warned, even as his arms came up to circle her waist. "We're still at work. The office is empty, the door is closed, and I happen to know you've been thinking about kissing me for the last hour." His smile was wicked and warm and entirely hers. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because," she said, pressing her lips to his, "I've been thinking about it too." When they broke apart, both breathing slightly harder, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly.